Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I'll call the May 12th meeting of the Finance Committee to order. First item on the agenda is public participation. I'm going to assume there is none. And so we'll move directly to the second item, which is the municipal third quarter report, and I'll recognize Brian McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the FinCom. So tonight I'll be presenting the third quarter financial report, giving a status update on the town's position as far as revenues and expenditures. And away we go. I just want to make mention too, although this is just a summary of the financial reporting we put on the web, we have posted the full report on the website under the typical budget menu item on the town's website. So the full reporting would be there. Getting into the general fund, as you can see, starting out with total revenue, $80 million. Our target year to date, obviously 3/4 of the year through, is at 75%. We're at 76% in total revenues. You're saying, well, what does that mean? Well, 1% on $80 million is about $800,000. So we're ahead of schedule as far as that goes. Moving down the line, property tax, you can see we're at 74.8%. There's always lag there at this time of year. There's always a certain percent of people that don't pay in a timely manner, and we send out demand bills. So that's expected. There's nothing to be concerned there. State aid, again, is trending a little bit stronger than what we had anticipated. A lot of that is due to some of their payments to the town are monthly, and they're no longer quarterly. Or they should say they were quarterly, they're monthly now, but in some cases some of them are quarterly. So there's timing issues there with the state, but again, we expect that to be coming in within the budget. SBAB reimbursement, of course, we received the full $923,000. Local receipts, if you take a look there, it's a little stronger than what we had anticipated, what we had estimated. That, again, is attributed to motor vehicle excise, which we see trending upwards. And that revenue generally doesn't hit until the third and fourth quarter. So we put out the main bill run in January, February time frame. It's due generally end of February, March, and then we have a second, what we call commitment, that goes out in March, and now we just got a third one. And we've seen all increases in there for about 5 or 6% in motor vehicle excise. So right now, I think through Q3, and actually I should say year to date, we've already realized all the motor vehicle excise that we have estimated year to date, so we're in good shape there. So as far as the rest of local receipts, again, we look at construction and building permits here in town. We still have a very strong market. The building department is reporting that their permits are tracking, I think, at about 50% greater than they were last year at this point in time. So that means, revenues in the sense of building permit fees, but also results in changes in assessed value, and so that will have some impact as well. Moving on to expenses, you can see right now we about 80% expended through the year. We should be at 75%. And that's really mainly due to we run a PO system, so a lot of the monies that are in our budget, we encumber it on day one. For instance, municipal properties knows that they're going to spend the utilities budget. They encumber that whole amount, so that's why you see a different number there, and that's typical if you look at years past as well, because of that PO system. So a lot of that is attributed to that. Again, we don't anticipate any budget overruns here, except for snow and ice. So moving on to the other components of our budgets, which would be primarily the enterprise funds. If you notice, the first two enterprise funds here I'll be discussing, this is the last time you'll be seeing those. If you remember at town meeting, the Council on Aging Enterprise Fund, so the van for the Council on Aging, that particular van is now getting rolled into transportation. So starting July 1, we will no longer have this fund, and then the fund balance will close to the general fund as part of the free cash. So starting out with Council on Aging, if you look here, a couple of funny nuances, and every one of these is sort of different than the other. But this particular one here, typically we have always given them a tax subsidy of $50,000 historically for years. Well, we didn't use that tax subsidy in FY15, if you recall. The plan was to spend down their retained earnings. So if you look at the trending here in FY14, at this point in time, we're about 73% in revenues compared to FY15, which is 35. And you say, well, what's going on there, Brian? Well, if you look, the 50K tax subsidy is realized on day one. So it makes sense that 3/4 of the year, you're going to be pretty much, your revenue should be at 3/4 of the year. This particular year, because there is no tax subsidy, we're only at about 35% because it does not recognize that $39,749 of retained earnings. We only use that as we need that, so it's not an actual revenue, it's sitting in fund balance. So there's a couple little nuances there. If you look year-to-date, we have a loss of $28,000, but that's not including the $39,000 of retained earnings. So we're projecting this fund balance to be pretty close to zero at year-end. Moving on to the Nursing Enterprise Fund, very similar situation here. You know, it's closed out on June 30th. The target would be to try to close this out. Oops, I'm sorry, Bob. Yep. The target here would be to close this out very close to a zero fund balance, so we're going to try to maintain this for a smooth landing at June 30th. If you recall, we pledged $165,000 of tax subsidy at the special town meeting. That money is realized. That is in that $358,000. However, the retained earnings, which we had pledged at the annual town meeting, is not in there. So right now it's showing a loss of $51,000, but again, not recognized $135,000 of retained earnings. So again, we'll have to monitor this closely. The numbers look a little peculiar, but if you look at the FY14 budget versus the FY15 actuals at this point in time, they're trending very similar. So we don't expect, again, any dramatic changes here. We think we're going to have a soft, smooth landing.
If I do my math right, and I was just doing it in my head, so goodness knows I may not have, but if you take out the 165, which is in there, you said.
Correct.
So now you're at 211, and 135 from retained earnings is not in there, or is in there?
The retained earnings piece, Herman, is not in the revenue piece.
Okay, so right now, year-to-date, the loss is $211,000. Is that correct?
Without the 160, you said without the 165?
Yeah,
it would be the 165 and the
without the tax
50,000.
subsidy.
You're about 215 in the hole, correct?
That's,
Yeah.
okay. So you're 215 in the hole, and that's through March the 31st.
Correct.
So you got another, what, quarter?
Yeah, we got 3 months of revenue to go and 3 months of expenses. And
Do you have an estimate as to what the ultimate loss might be?
if you look, our free cash certification last year was at 6/30/14 was about $44,000. We believe that we are probably going to be close to pretty much a zero balance there. The plan is to run this out so that we don't go into a deficit, but we try to control spending.
So if when, oh, maybe not quite a year ago, you told us we lost $5,000 a week on nursing, the conclusion I draw from this is that not a thing has changed and we're still on track to lose $5,000 a week for the year.
If you look at this, it looks like we're going to have, just in fees alone, probably about $250,000 in fees. She's trending at about, probably at year end, about $550, so it'll be about $300. So between the tax subsidy of $165 and the $135 of retained earnings, that's why I said I think we're going to be pretty close to having a zero fund balance.
So a little more than $5,000 a week then. $300,000 loss.
Yes,
Maybe $6,000 a week.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's $300,000.
Doug, you got a question?
I think you may have answered that. You know, there's been a long history.
Oh, hit the button so they can hear you.
There's been a long history of our taking numbers that, you know, were subsidies and so on. We agreed in town meeting to give them $150,000, so the $150,000 disappeared into the numbers, and it looks like we're not losing so much, right? I'd much rather that on this kind of thing, and I realize this is the last iteration of this one, but on this kind of thing in the future, if you report these numbers to the Finance Committee, as a retro, here's what happened in the last quarter and year to date, then those numbers shouldn't be buried. I mean, it's not 51,000. We had to put $165,000 in cash into it, and so, it's $200,000+.
No, that's a good point, Doug, and we actually had talked internally about this. There's a lot of numbers here, but there's not a lot of text, and I think, for folks to understand that, maybe we need to put more words to this so that people clearly understand that, or, look at this presentation and how can we simplify it and make it a little bit easier for people to understand. It's something that we have talked about.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to follow up that with another question. I think that the reason that I focus on this, and a lot of us on this committee did, is that reporting the subsidies as buried gives the public the impression that you're only losing $51,000.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
It's going to be $300,000 by the end of the year.
Right.
Okay, and that unless a marketing program is successful in the near term, and given that our competitors are intently marketing their services, the situation's going to get worse. Right? And so our concern as a committee, I think, was that you need to let the numbers stand there so that the public can understand what's happening. And when the day comes that we don't have all this surplus money floating around and reserves and so on, and we're down to the nitty-gritty on cash, at that point I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on the nursing service, because the numbers were transferred from subsidy over here to the operating numbers over there, making them look like it's only $51,000.
Right.
So when the day comes when we don't have money to throw around like this anymore, we're in a crunch, we're looking at serious tax increases, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars buried in the budget. And this is why I think members of this committee have said repeatedly that puddles of money hidden around the landscape is a really bad thing, because it prevents the public from understanding what's really going on.
Right.
Thank you.
Bob, you had a point?
Has there been any change in the rate at which revenue is accruing to this fund since all the wonderful changes that we voted at the special town meeting?
I don't, I'm not that familiar with it, Bob. I haven't been monitored probably as closely as I should. I know Heather's met with the finance director, Steve Barrett, herself. They've gone through some of the revenue projections, the reports, the receivable. I couldn't tell you honestly. I don't think there's been really any change.
That's all.
I think, if I recall the numbers correctly, we were tracking at around $250 a year revenue in the prior fiscal year, and now we seem to be tracking at around $211. So, if anything, it's a little worse. Yes, Doug. Then Margaret.
One of the things that I think occurred at the town meeting is that a number of prominent citizens stood up and said that this is something that was simply a matter of good marketing. And my understanding was that they were placing themselves, at the disposal of the town to help with that marketing effort. And as a result of their initiative to say this is easy and any fool can do it kind of message, it passed by a wider margin than it would have, which was very discouraging, because now hundreds of thousands of dollars are leaking out of this fund. And so I'm inclined to be a little tough about this and say, how has our extraordinary marketing effort performed over the last 6 months since we had this meeting, and presumably things have been done. I mean, 6 months is a rather long time to develop and implement a marketing plan. We should be seeing positive results. So on a month-by-month basis, as you look at this thing, are you seeing a significant improvement over the last 6 months in revenues?
Have we?
Are you?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, I didn't think so.
I think it's relatively flat.
Frankly, I don't think we're going to.
Right.
Margaret.
But it's not a business. Sorry. I did just want to remind me, and maybe Janet knows this better than you, Brian, but what did we budget for FY16 for the nursing? Do you remember? I feel like it was around 400,000.
It was 4 something. I thought it was closer to 5, maybe 478, 475.
But that was the total amount that we would have to pay out? So in other words, the difference between what we would take in and what we would get out, or were the revenues that we might expect just in the revenue
That was free
column?
of all subsidies. It was the clean number.
Yeah, I think that 475, I believe, actually, you know what, I have the book right here. If you,
Go right ahead, yeah. Herman will autograph that for you later.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to, when we did our budgeting, were we looking at, okay, we typically are losing 300,000, that's the difference between the revenues and the cost? Or is that just the full cost and our revenues go somewhere else?
No, we had revenues of around 150 included. In the revenue section, we had costs, I thought were in the 4-something range.
So the 4-something is the full cost,
So I
not
think
what the
that-
revenues backed out of them?
Right, the FY16 number was probably a loss of 300,000, and it looks like the FY15 number is going to be a loss of 300,000, so.
That's
In answer to your question, Doug, little progress seems to have been made, and we're certainly not projecting a turnaround based on the numbers we've seen.
All right, that's what I was curious about, so.
and my apologies, it's not in this book, it was still in the works, I think, so the final budget in here for FY16, the final operating budget, or the number, actually, you know what, there is a, this is enterprise, let me,
Sorry, Brian, mercifully, I'd say move on to the next.
Yeah.
well, maybe I just found it.
Nursing is always.
Hey, 478,000, see? Yeah.
It's a bloodbath. It's a bloodbath, just like we started.
And then there's the other, that was, yeah, and then I think, at the time, I think we were anticipating about $250,000 annually of revenue.
It's not what we budgeted, as I recall, but that reminds me. At town meeting, the former chair of the Board of Selectmen said something about unpaid receivables making a difference. Are we seeing a change? Is there a bunch of stuff that we haven't been paid for that we've provided service for, or is it?
Some of the numbers, from what I understand, and again, I haven't been involved in it as much as maybe I should have. I know the finance director has. He's worked with the marketing group as well as Heather. But my understanding is that in that receivable number was also part of the receivable that we use the Lally gift fund for. So we had to reduce the receivable by that amount. And so I know they were going back and looking at that. What that amount is, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Yeah. Well, we're still scrubbing that number.
Last year, when the consultants did their report, there was a pretty large receivable as well. I didn't think it had changed that much. So-
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, when we last looked, it was probably somewhere in the 170, 180 range, and we know it's probably significantly lower than that.
Okay. So yeah, move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you. So moving right along, so next would be the Septic Enterprise Fund. You know, this fund is pretty much, you know, on the tracks, just rolling down the road. We never see anything really too much here. It's pretty constant as far as revenues and expenditures. If you look, you know, we're tracking at 75% year-to-date as far as revenues. Doug does a good job at trying to control those expenses. It's only at 70. It's showing a profit right now about $7,500. Again, you know, it is what it is. I don't think there's anything out here that really jumps out at us. I think it's right where we expect it to be. Transfer Station and Recycling Fund gets a little more interesting. Again, this is one of these funds that has a few little nuances in it. When you have a enterprise fund and you pledge some of your retained earnings for capital expenditures as part of your total operations. So if you look at the projected revenues in your budget of 773, and we're tracking about 80%, some of that is from retained earnings because we pledge retained earnings for those capital replacements. It's not always the case, you know, in these particular funds where, you know, it's trending right where it should be because of those capital reserves. Again, it depends on when they were expended and when you know, bought that piece of equipment. So again, Corey does a nice job at handling all this. If you recall in the past, when he does the sticker, when he does the sticker sales, it's usually in Q2. So Q2, you realize all your revenues, and then for the rest of the year, you're only getting it in dribs and drabs through recycling and some other subsequent sticker sales, if somebody wants a second or somebody new in town. But he does a good job at handling this. Right now, our year-to-date revenues are 80%. His expenses are 81%. Again, because of the capital outlay, so that kind of skews the numbers. But right now, we don't anticipate any problem here in the enterprise fund. And I just want to make a note, though, too, that this will be the last year that we have a NESWIC fund balance. If you recall at town meeting, we spent $1 million, and essentially it's the same as spending free cash. So the idea here was to make sure that the fund is a little simpler to read and make it easier for town meeting to understand. So there'll be no longer the fund formerly known as NESWIC at the town meeting or in any of the warrant articles. So I think it's going to help us all out in that regard. So we look forward to that. So you're going to see a significant reduction in that fund balance. Yes, Doug. Yes.
There were two funds, as I recall it. There was the remaining NESWIC balance, and then there was the funds in NESWIC that were encumbered in the event of a lawsuit that might ensue. Which of these is the $1 million that was in cash that was the last of the NESWIC money? Is this the million that is?
It is, Doug. This is the last remaining piece of that.
Okay.
The other component you were talking about, we had was about $1,328,000. We spent that down at the last annual town meeting.
We did. Okay.
We did. So this is the remaining piece of the NESWIC money.
So NESWIC is gone.
NESWIC is gone. So you're going to see about $1 million come out of that $1.4 million in fund balance, and that remaining piece is just going to be attributed now to the transfer and recycling fund.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick curiosity, the expenses, does that include any additional FTEs that have been hired in anticipation of pay-as-you-throw?
This budget does not, Herman.
I'm sorry. I know the budget doesn't. My question is, do the actual expenses...
Not to my knowledge. We haven't hired anybody down there.
Thank you.
Moving on to the sewer enterprise fund, again, some nuances with this one. With regards to the fund balance, if you recall, we had a significantly reasonable fund balance, or down in the tune of $300,000 or $400,000. The State Department of Revenue said we could no longer have a reservation for capital replacements. That flew to the fund balance, creating a substantial fund balance in this. And as you know, at the past annual town meeting, we created the new sewer stabilization fund. So again, this one here, you're going to see about $1.6 million coming out of that $2.29 million of fund balance. The operations of the fund are pretty much, again, on the tracks. This is, self-sufficient, not a lot to do here. A couple things I'll point out. Revenues are at 72%. You're going to say, well, 3% on $1.7 million is a pretty big number. It's running a deficit right now of $200,000. We put out capital assessments to some of the town facilities as well as the region. The region's capital assessment's $183,000. That's not in these numbers. We put the bill out in the street, and that was, I believe, on this warrants payable this week, so we'll be seeing that check. So, and then, looking at the expenses year-to-date, 83%, we incur a lot of that debt that we pay out of this. It's all up front. We pay that at the beginning of the year. So that's why a lot of this is front-loaded. So again, I think when the dust settles, we're going to be in good shape here, and we don't anticipate any problems. And moving on to the ambulance fund, another kind of a unique fund with some nuances. They're all kind of, they all have their own little challenges. This particular budget, if you recall, from town meeting had about $577,000 of capital outlay, that being an ambulance and also the startup of ALS. The startup of ALS has been delayed due to a union contract settlement, so we're still trying to work that. The ambulance was purchased. That is in this expenditure here. Year-to-date revenues at 43%. You're going to say, well, where's all the other money coming from? Well, if you look, again, we pledged $577,000 of retained earnings. The true operation here in this budget, just for operations with no capital outlay, is about $750. Year-to-date, we get about $570, and that's trending about 76%. So it's right where we should be. As far as expenses as well, you know, again, because our budget was much higher and a lot of that capital outlay that we had pledged that we're going to use for ALS is not going to happen, so the expense is not going to happen. So again, we believe that this budget is going to be balanced at year end, and we don't anticipate any problem here.
Bob?
During all of the discussions in prior years about the nursing fund, your esteemed supervisor explained to me that retained earnings somehow go into revenue on the first day of the fiscal year. Now, if that's true, then $577,000 went into revenue on the first of the year, and yet you only have year-to-date $569, which means you have less revenue than you put in at the beginning. Is there a mouse in the cupboard?
Well, I could tell you, Bob, that if my supervisor told you that, I'm sure it was not intentional to mislead you, but the only time we recognize any revenue is when it's a tax subsidy. We move that money in on day one. The retained earnings, we only use that when we need that. So if the year goes on and we don't need to use the retained earnings, we don't put that into the revenue numbers. We only put that there when we need it to offset the expenditure.
Thank you.
Where is your esteemed supervisor tonight, anyway?
He's probably at home having a nice, relaxing night. and I saved the best for last because I know you're all itching. So here we are with snow and ice update. So I just wanted to give you an update of where we were because I know folks have been asking with this interesting season we had this year of snow and blizzards. So the budget was $526,000 year to date. We spent $796 for a deficit of $269 through Q3. And what I did take a look at is where we are today, and we added probably another $7,000 or $8,000 of expense through here. So we're going to be about $275,000 in the hole in snow and ice. That's if we don't get any more snow between now and June 30th. Anything could happen, because if you look at the storms out west, you know, you think you're safe. And so I think that's where we're going to be right now. The plan is to try to cover that, you know, at year end. As you know, State Department of Revenue, this is the one budget that you can run into a deficit and raise in a subsequent year. We typically don't like to do that. We try to, you know, handle that within the town's operations at 6:30, and that's what the plan is right now. So we're scrubbing budgets, we're going through numbers, and so the plan is to cover it and have a balanced budget at 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there an update on the Middlesex pension situation?
Yeah, Middlesex County, they didn't lower the assessment. The numbers are what the numbers are. We did meet with them on several occasions, and they did have an offer on the table. We had a settlement a couple of years ago, and one of the offers was to take that settlement money, because they were paying that back to us over a period of years, I think there's 3 years left, and to pay down our assessment and help out in that regard. The problem with that is you look at what that does to your budget today, and then the significant increase you get in the subsequent years. We thought that might not be the wisest thing to do. So right now, our plan is to pay the assessment as it is, which we have not got yet, which we probably will sometime later this month. So, but I believe it was around $3.2 million.
But that would require $500,000 in other cuts, other
It was
places?
about 611, I think. Yeah, and there might have been some other things. There was some savings, I believe, with the combination of the land use position and the economic development. So I think there was some savings there as well, which will bring down that 611. The budget book group is meeting Thursday, and that'll be part of our discussion.
So Plan B, which was cut the budgets, is in effect?
That's correct.
Okay. Other than covering your snow and ice deficit, will there be any other turnbacks?
We don't
that you
believe
can
so.
see?
Yeah, we're going to have our hands full, I think, with trying to get this budget balanced. I think we'll be in good shape. We're going to monitor it a lot. Other than saying, the reserve position is good. I wouldn't call that a turnback. It's not a budget turnback, but did I say reserve? I meant revenues.
So we shouldn't anticipate any
But I don't anticipate any turnback. We
year-end,
don't at this point.
any wild year-end spending coming up?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And that's because mostly of the snow and ice deficit?
Correct, Margaret, yeah.
Other questions? Yes, Doug?
Okay, I think there was a big stream of stuff there. Did I hear you say that the shortfall on an annual basis with respect to Middlesex, spread annually, is $600,000, and we're going to recoup that from our budget?
Yeah, Doug, if you recall, when we regionalized, one of the last things that we had done, it was like in the 11th and a half hour, is go to Middlesex and said, hey, some of these people that the town are paying for in the region, they're going to be region in the next fiscal year, can you give us a revised number? When we got the original assessment, I believe it was around $3 million or 3.1. They lowered it to about $2.5 million. Now, maybe that should have set up a flag. It was a significant reduction. When Steve and I did the budget for this coming year, we took the prior year's expense of what we believed was the $2.5 million, that was a good number we were dealing with, and we took it up, whatever Middlesex saying they were increasing rates 5 or 6%. We took that up to that number. And then when we got that actual new assessment, that was the much higher number that we did not anticipate at all. So to cover that, it was 611. Some of that's going to be covered, I believe, with the merging of those two positions, because that was two separate items that we had combined, so that's going to give us some savings. But the plan is to cover the balance of that within the FY16 operations.
The coverage is 611, right? And then from our previous discussion, snow and ice is 270,000, 275,000, right?
Different
Two
years.
separate fiscal years.
All right, okay, touche. It's just that in the context of a $30-odd million budget, to be able to blithely cover off $600,000 and oops, makes me wonder about the budget, in the first place. I mean, 600 on 30 is a big number.
It is. We are very concerned, and we're trying to, we get our hands full with that. We'll do our best in trying to get it balanced. But you're absolutely right.
If it's going to be necessary for you to make cuts in order to achieve that, then I would advise that, and I defer to the chairman on whether he wants to sanction this remark, but I would advise you to that's a big number. You're going to pull 600,000 out of something, okay? I mean, as a finance committee, I'd want to know where you're going to pull it from. What's going to get chewed on to produce 600,000 because of Middlesex, a pension fund screw up, not our fault, but theirs. So if we're going to have to lean on our $30 million budget to make up the 600,000, I'd want to know exactly what we're going to do. What's going to get hit to pay 600 to them?
We've looked at that, and the only thing I want to mention, and again, I don't have all the details in front of me, but we did have some one-time expenditures in the FY15 budget that didn't recur in 16, for instance, the town-wide revaluation. It's a one-time hit in the fiscal year, so that money is basically going to get turned back to help out paying for other programs, if you would. So there are a few things like that as well, Doug, in the FY15 budget that weren't going to, again, happen in FY16, so that gave us the ability to cover some of that, if you would. Okay. But we will have probably some more details on that.
Good, thank you.
There was a preliminary list of cuts floated, around the budget time, that if they had to go this route, this is what they do. It's certainly not binding.
I just think we should be refreshed on what that is and what, because we're going to get into
probably
the next budget cycle, and there's a $600,000 number that's slid across the table.
Probably at our next meeting, it'd be a good idea to see if you're ready. I mean, it's only 2 weeks away, but then again, the end of the year is not that far away either. We ought to see what cuts you're really anticipating. Yes, Herman.
I remember there was a rather pleasant surprise with regard to new growth with respect to Quail Ridge. What's that look like? Is there any extra money there?
That's a good question, Herman. You know, as I said, building permits are up this year. Clearly, that's going to have some impact on the new growth figure. You know, anything greater than what my estimate is, as you know, is going to go to free cash. You know, I try to do, try to get my hands on that as best as possible and what that number is going to be. A lot of it is, you know, I've seen in the past where permits are issued and they're never acted upon, or it's anticipated, but it's never acted upon. So I tried to look at Quail Ridge and a couple of other projects out there, and it's really kind of crystal balling because a lot of this is 18 months out sometimes, or 12 to 18 months. And so when you're putting the budget together and you're putting the revenue pieces together, you know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You know, you're too conservative, it goes to free cash. You're too aggressive, you have a revenue deficit. But yeah, we are going to, I think we're going to do better than probably what we had anticipated. There's also this thing called supplemental tax bills, which is it's a kind of an accelerated new growth program. State Department of Revenue, it was a new legislative change, implemented this a number of years ago. If you receive an occupancy permit during the course of the year for new construction, and that occupancy permit, at that time, I assess that property at full value because it's complete, and if it increases that value from the preliminary bill, which was a snapshot at the beginning of the fiscal year, and it increases it by more than 50%, and I know I'm getting into the weeds here, you have some additional money coming into the town for that. So basically, you have a house on July 1 that's, say, 30% complete. During the course of the year in December, you get an occupancy permit, now you're 70% complete. I can take that delta and put out a tax bill on the street from the date of the occupancy to the end of the fiscal year, so it is a revenue source for the town. So some of that is also what we're seeing because of the new construction and some of the new developments like Quail Ridge, so that is also going to add to that as well. But I try to look at that too, Herman, based on past year's experience and what we've seen as far as volume of permits, so.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Good job.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
May I suggest that we move item number 2, the job descriptions, to number 3, and go ahead into the fiscal 16 budget process, town meeting comments and so on, since it follows right on the heels of what we've just been talking about.
I have no objection. Okay. So, moving on to the FY16 budget process and town meeting. As we do after each fiscal year, we tend to have a, for lack of a better term, post-mortem discussion of what could have gone better and what we could do in this coming year to improve things. So, at this point, while I have my views on the subject, I'm not going to say a whole lot because last year my principal comment was that it all came together very late, and I was quite upset with that, and this year it came together later. But if anybody else wants to weigh in on the topic, I'm all ears. Herman, since this is your last chance, why don't you go first?
Yeah, well, obviously, the fact that it came together late is something that can't be ignored. I mean, that's got to be fixed. My goodness, you know. We were at our last meeting and still couldn't make any, it was difficult for us to make recommendations. And even with that, the summaries were, if not incorrect, certainly incomplete in many instances. That has to be fixed. The other part that's been bothering me over the years, since I can remember, is the lack of attendance. Goodness, you know, we made some pretty significant decisions with a very small percentage of the town citizens there. Now, I've been around for more years than I'll admit to, so I know all the rules, I know all the arguments. But the bottom line is, there's got to be some sort of innovative approach to town meeting where more people get involved at the point where the decisions are made. What that is, I'm not, it would take people a little bit better informed, particularly technically, than I. But there's got to be a way. There's just got to be a way to involve more people. And if there isn't, then it's time maybe to look at the structure of our governance and take a look at maybe elected town meeting representatives or council mayoral thing or something, where more of the citizens have a participation, even if it is a general election, which, by the way, wasn't very sterling in and of itself. Right. Because we only had one contested election and many seats, or the normal seats, the high person got 400 votes, and that was the winner. 400 votes in a town with 15,000 voters.
11,000, 12,000.
Yeah. So I don't know what the solutions are, but it's got to be looked at. It just has to be.
Bob, do you have anything you want to add, or since you've been observing him for a while?
I thought things, other than the lateness with which things came down from the town on the warrant, went reasonably well. I guess I would differ with Herman about worrying about the number of people at town meeting, because, in fact, I don't believe decisions are really made at town meeting. I think decisions are made, by and large, over the course of the year as different issues come up and people appear before different boards and committees. So, since I don't think there was much diminution in that, as opposed to previous years, the fact that I would like to see more people at town meeting too, but it doesn't worry me that we have that. I think it largely represents that people are not that, they're not that upset by what is being done, and they're not that interested in devoting their time to that as opposed to soccer or whatever else the younger parents in town are doing. With Mr. Mullins leaving us and the point of view being his baby, it probably behooves us to rethink how to do that. I'm not sure that the point of view had the impact this year on the thinking of the school committee and the town as it's had in past years. And indeed, I think this committee and the school committee need to find some way so that there is more interaction earlier on, because it's partially the way the schools are and the committee there runs itself, but not that I think they're ever going to pay that much attention to our concerns, but I do think we could have a more fruitful dialogue if we got to it earlier.
Doug?
I don't disagree with Bob, although I think that my instincts are that the more vigorous citizen participation is in town meeting, the better. I just think that what ends up happening is that the tide gets low enough so that some of the rocks start showing. We end up with a constituency that is largely driven by the school population. It's a special interest group. Granted, it's the biggest thing in town, and lots of us have been part of it. But they are not the only special interest group, which benefits from the ability to go into a town meeting organized and tip it over. I think that certainly happened with the Morrison Farm budget the last time, the time before this one, and my sense is that there have been other events like the nursing fund and so on where if there had been a robust participation by citizens in general, I don't think some of the minority groups or special interest groups would have found it so easy to essentially dictate policy. So from that standpoint, I favor informed participation. although I would add some embroidery to that. One is that I think that our town meeting occurs too early in the budget cycle for the Commonwealth. Frequently, we have met and made some decisions well before the governor's budget has been thoroughly vetted in the legislature. And there have been a couple of years where we thought things were going to happen one way, and they did not happen that way. And so I would recommend that some sort of special commission, this could be the league or some other, nonpartisan, non-interested group in town should look at whether or not our town meeting ought to occur later in the budget cycle for the Commonwealth. The other thing is that I think that one of the things that's going on is that we don't do a good job of publicizing the issues in town. The newspaper isn't what it used to be. There's a blog site that has become influential, claiming numbers of 2,600 unique readers per month. As I recall, the Beacon was at 4,500 to 4,700 unique readers per month. That doesn't account for the paper being passed around, and it's hard to quantify that anyway. But I think that those are places where the town should do a better job of stating some of the issues that are facing the town. And whether that's somebody on the finance committee doing it, or whether it's a town manager doing it, or whether it's one of the selectmen being designated to take an article and create a précis of just what is on the table, and write an article or a column or a blog or whatever we want to call it for publication in these other sites to tell people what the issues are, non-political. And it needs to be completely and scrupulously neutral. State the facts, ma'am, that kind of thing. But it's not happening. And so we get all the way up on town meeting, and you have some people who sometimes appear to be bewildered by what's going on the agenda. And I think that's a mistake. We should certainly, we can't bitch about the fact that people don't know what they're doing in town meeting if we're not part of the solution, making sure that the information is getting out to people early enough for them to think about it and raise questions and come to town meeting prepared to vote meaningfully. So as far as that's concerned, I think that publicizing the town meeting is certainly more appropriate. We should go all the way down that line we can in marketing our existing form of democracy before we get down into thinking about changing it. And if turnout is the problem, I'm not convinced that a representative town meeting is the solution. What I heard from feedback from Lexington that went over to the representative forum, they were very unhappy with it. That there were people who were sort of professional, alderman types who went to these meetings and were not listening to their neighbors, were unresponsive, and stood there and voted everybody's position. And there was great unhappiness about whether or not they were really representative. So before we go there, I think we should do the best we can to enhance what we already have. And once we've concluded that all efforts to enhance it have failed, then we should start down the road on saying, okay, what's the alternative? Thank you.
Just hold on, Margaret.
That's fine.
Doug, there are towns that go far beyond what we do in terms of putting our message in the warrant or a point of view out there. There are towns that actually issue a finance committee commentary on the warrant, separate from the warrant, just their analysis, their discussion, their recommendations. I mean, are you thinking that's something we should be aiming at?
I advocate that we examine all the possibilities that are available to us, and that certainly is one of them. It puts a tremendous burden on the Finance Committee.
Yes, it does.
It puts a tremendous burden on staff, because the Finance Committee is not going to do that out of whole cloth. They're going to be working with staff very closely about where'd you get that number and what does this mean and so on. So they're very clear-headed about exactly what the numbers are and where they came from. And so staff will have to work hand in glove with the Finance Committee to generate something like that. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying that there's a mechanical effort that's a two-way street between staff and the Finance Committee that has to be really thriving in order for the Finance Committee's contribution to be considered, the word. Okay?
Margaret?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the just the notion that we need greater turnout, and I do think it's important because I think better decisions are made when you have more people involved, period. And I do think there's a general sense of the decision's already been made by all the town leaders, what effect am I going to have by going to town meeting? So I think there's probably that. There's also, it's just the town warrant, and I've said this for a long time, it's not very user-friendly, and I've given a lot of suggestions on how things can be made to be more user-friendly, but it's simply not as it is. And to have a warrant sent out that where the largest items that people are asked to vote on, there's actually no number in there, it is really absurd. And frankly, as a new person in town and wanting to kind of get up to speed and wanting to be involved, I was just absolutely baffled. It's like, what is it saying? But there's no number here. I don't know why there's not a number. What is it asking me to do? I have no idea. And I've said, and I get that the numbers, as we know, they kind of don't get finalized till the end, but that's fine. You have a link. You have a website saying, go to this page to find what the updated numbers are. So it's not some like a sum of money. I mean, that's totally and completely useless to the person that's receiving the warrant on the largest items that we're voting on. And I think one of the issues is that people, we're sort of in the situation with our taxes that, it's sort of like the metaphor of the frogs being boiled, where they don't realize because the heat is turned up so slowly that they don't really realize that they're getting boiled, whereas if they were just thrown in the pot of boiling water, they would jump out. And, we had a really big increase in our school budgets last year, and people were kind of up in arms, and there was a question as to whether it was going to pass and all this. This year, it was another really big increase, but it's like, we're desensitized to that, And I think that's just what happens. I mean, that's just how people behave, and we have to kind of, every year, and we all know what was in the school budget, and it was difficult, and there were, these things in there that we really couldn't change, but at least not this year, we couldn't. But, I think outreach is absolutely essential. We started down that path a little bit with Finance Committee this year. I'm hoping we can do a little bit more this next year. I do think, though, that, it's not really the Finance Committee's, it's not really in the Finance Committee's scope to be doing massive amounts of outreach to try to get turnout at town meeting. I actually really think that is the scope of the Board of Selectmen. And I don't know what they do. I don't know if they do anything. One thing I asked when they were deliberating about the nursing service, I asked, have you done any outreach, proactive outreach on this to get people's opinion besides just opinions that are coming to you? Because that's obviously going to be one opinion. And they said no. And I think that's where some of the problems start, when you're not being proactive about, getting people out there, getting people's opinions, then nobody feels like they've been reached out to. Why should I care? Nobody really wants my opinion, and it's only the really mad people that come. But a lot of people are out there that aren't really mad, but do have good ideas and would like to be able to share their opinions if they felt like they had the right, place to do it, and it would be heard.
Yeah, I think town meeting was semi-successful, but I agree with with Doug, and not necessarily agree with Bob that the right decisions were made. I think Doug, in the sense that town meeting may occur too early, especially if you don't have numbers behind these warrant articles. It makes no sense to even discuss them at that point. Plus, a lot of the information, a lot of the specifics or the final language of the warrants don't come into us until the very last minute, and just like an hour before the town meeting begins, we're voting on these items. And if we don't have the facts, how are the residents of the town going to make an informed decision? I think that the warrant really has to come out sooner, and if it doesn't make it by a certain, like a month before the town meeting, actual town meeting, then those items should not be included, and you're just going to have to shift it to another town meeting. I think some decision, There's opportunities for new technology, like Margaret was saying, and we need greater public participation, and maybe we can take advantage of some technology, and I'm sure other towns must have other similar issues that they may be solved in a novel way. If you can vote for your favorite America Has Talent or American Idol person by just sending a text, why couldn't the citizens send a text or email or have some kind of ballot or have the warrants organized so that all the voting will become in one block, so they don't have to sit through a lot of stuff. I think the special interest is a problem when it's a low turnout. It doesn't take much to really come to influence the vote that may not really be reflective of what the wants of the towns are. And there are some bad decisions, I think. Maybe I shouldn't say bad decisions, but the zoning at the Trader Joe's shopping center, that's a fiasco. That should, because garbage isn't picked up it's picked up 20 minutes too early. Retailers and merchants are not allowed to expand or change their product, the size of their store or the products that they sell and things of that nature. It's ridiculous. I think that the planning board or the board of selectmen or someone should have done a better job in solving that problem, and I think it has to be be given a priority for the next time. Page you throw, I think that it wasn't a lot of information that the people could make an informed decision on. I think it all boils down to the warrant comes out too late to really have for the people to study, for even the finance committee to study, and we shouldn't be sitting at a conference room a half hour before a town meeting starts to vote on these issues. It's just not the way we should be doing things. But I think they really have to start exploiting ways to get better public participation without, and one of the ways to do that is get either have these issues really clarified in the form of a website or easier to read or more user-friendly warrant article, document, whatever. But I think there are opportunities to make the whole process more efficient.
Well, thank you all. In my experience, what brings out the crowd at town meeting is a dog leash law or a tax increase. I am told, though I can't verify it, that at one time in our early history, the Congregationalist minister was allowed to levy fines for people that didn't come to town meeting. Now that could solve a lot of problems. In terms of, I won't reiterate any more about things coming together late. I will say that as the ALG went this year, I've been on a few, it was one of the better processes. We weren't down to the last minute, all the more reason why we should have been prepared early. And there wasn't nearly the infighting, bickering that I've seen in past years. So I tend to be a skeptic of the ALG process from time to time, and I thought this year it actually went pretty well. So with that, I take it you got everything down, Margaret? Okay. Doug, you got one more comment?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. One is that in terms of governance, one of the things that is striking is the extent to which our major committees are siloed. And so the Economic Development Committee and the Design Review Board and the Planning Board and you start marching around the landscape, you notice that these committees rarely ever meet together. And I think that would be a salutary change. We had a all three boards meeting here, which I thought was a good opportunity for people to exchange views and so on. I think that should be institutionalized. I think that our committees should not be isolated, and I think there's been a lot of frustration on the planning board. They don't feel they plan. They feel that they're an afterthought, and it's been a difficult process to get people to serve on the planning board. It's been tough on the board, and the committees themselves suffer from that. So I think that was the first comment I was going to make. It's an internal one, but the other comment is that, and this is an old drum, I'll beat on it one more time, is that as the towns are not communicating with each other, we don't. I mean, our finance committee should be talking to the finance committee in Boxborough, in our neighboring towns, and other towns that have interests similar to ours, because otherwise all of us are out there alone trying to reinvent the wheel. And that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, there's lots of great people that are involved in these issues in town finance all across the Commonwealth. And, well, it's 351 towns. We all know that some of them are goat patches, but, you know, if you get down and you take the cities out, you take the gateway cities out, and you take the small towns in the Berkshires out of it, and you start saying, okay, how many towns do we have in Massachusetts that have a meaningful similarity to Acton in terms of what our challenges are? It's certainly 150. And so, you know, one of the vehicles is the Association of Town Finance Committees, and I think that we should raise our hand in the next ATFC meeting and say, you know what, we're not, the association meetings are lovely, but it isn't enough, because the towns themselves need to be talking to each other and exchanging good ideas. And sometimes people come up with stuff that's a great solution, and we are completely ignorant of it because it's just not being communicated. So I think that within the town, our boards need to be better coordinated. We certainly need to be talking to each other. And outside of the town, there needs to be more than the simple mechanisms that MAPC and the ATFC offer us. Thank you.
Moving on to the discussion of the job description for the land use planning economic development position. The copy of the job description is attached in your package, though Margaret was nice enough to send it out to you yesterday, I believe, for your review. I have heard from a couple people, but rather than try and paraphrase what they said, I'll let you guys speak for yourself. So would anybody like to make the first comment? Doug? Oh, no, Bob.
My eyes got tired before I got through it. I can't imagine this extremely bureaucratic piece of paper is the way to find the best person. My biggest concern is at the bottom of whatever page it is. It says preferred qualifications. Certification as a town planner by the AICP or A1CP, whatever it is. That was not my impression of the job that we voted at town meeting. I thought we wanted somebody who could provide supervision for 4 different subparts of the town, including health, which has nothing to do with town planning. Someone who could interact with the broader community of commercial and nonprofit groups that could bring opportunities for services and employment to the town, as well as be of some assistance to the town manager. And I don't think that's the person this job description is looking for. So I'm very, very concerned about what, in fact, is the idea of the selectmen in looking for this particular person. Our friend and colleague of long standing, Mr. Mullen, is not here, but there's a person who has lots of supervisory experience, works in development, does things in the town. I mean, you've got the Friends of Leary Field and the Friends of the Lower Fields and the Friends of the Morrison Farm and maybe the Friends of a dozen other things that I don't know about. But That's not the kind of, that seems to me the kind of person that you would want for this position. That's not the kind of person that you're looking for in this set of job descriptions. So my advice, if you're giving any advice to the selectmen, Mr. Chairman, is throw this out and start over again.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic with Bob's concern about the fact that the job description, as it sort of has evolved, is not the two job descriptions that we were presented with prior to the town meeting. If you recall, there was a director of economic development type position, and there was a position for land use planning. I'm very sensitive to the fact that we have a zoning crisis in town, and that this is exemplified by all the effort that's gone into Kelly's Corner to try and rezone other people's real estate, where there's some considerable question about whether or not the other people whose real estate is being redefined are necessarily on board about it. I remember the squeamishness of the ULI people who got up in this room and said, your town's really not blighted, and there's a limited number of things you can do in the absence of any blight, when they were asked to opine about Kelly's Corner. Meanwhile, we had the fiasco in West Acton, where Steinberg Lally was looking to do a T-bone lot on Ann Sussman's house once they bought it from her, and hadn't really been aware of what the reaction of the rest of the community on Windsor Avenue was going to be when they realized that all of their houses could be subject to redevelopment with massive infusions of attached townhouses in the backyard, which is exactly what was being proposed. And so the only thing that really saved our bacon in that meeting is that Mr. Steinberg stood up and said the property's off the table, and he withdrew it. Amazing. Very gutsy thing for him to have done. There are land developers who are not as civic-minded as he is, who are absolutely sharks, and one of those guys would not have taken that step, and we would have had a hell of a fight on our hands, and it would have been destructive of the neighborhood, and it would not have been good for the town. So when all that was over with, when he sat down, a leading citizen of Acton, who is one of the major figures in West Acton, and was a founding member of the Economic Development Committee and is widely known to everybody, stood up and said, okay, look, that we just escaped barely with that. So how do we, how can we contribute? How can the citizens of West Acton help you revise the zoning concepts that led us down this path in the first place? Because obviously not everybody's going to be as gracious as Steinberg was. And the answer he got, and it's on tape, and it was it was right there, and the committee was here, was from the planning director, who said that he was not prepared to dedicate resources to work with the citizens of West Acton to make revisions in the West Acton zoning structure because all of his resources were going into Kelly's Corner. Which, of course, begged the question about, well, what about East Acton, North Acton, West Acton, right? I mean, where are your resources going? If they're all going into one intersection at Kelly's Corner, what about everything else? And the answer ultimately comes out to be that we have serious zoning problems around town in a number of ways. East Acton clearly failed. It's now cars up against houses. North Acton is thriving in some places, not in others. West Acton filled up with houses in ticky-tacky going up the valley. The idea was it was going to stimulate retail. Where's the retail? So there's a lot of challenging questions that relate to zoning and what the impact of our zoning structure is on the rest of the town that are not being addressed because all the resources of the planning department, at least to take the man at his word, are going into Kelly's Corner, where you're talking about maybe a dozen parcels. So it's a situation where I think that we need to be prepared to invest in solutions for zoning across the whole town. And I looked initially at this director, or whatever the title was, of the planning side of things, as somebody who really could make a positive contribution by making sure that we were moving around the landscape and dealing with all of our zoning problems, and not just at an intersection. And I think that got lost in the shuffle. Secondly, once we merged the two job descriptions and said, okay, well, we can't fund both of them, so we're going to put the economic development guy together with the planning guy, and then he's going to supervise everything. You start reading it, and I was almost tempted to scan this thing and do a word Microsoft Word, thing on it, where you give me all the words that say supervise, and because all I could see was supervise, and it was not about doing. It was a position that looked like an assistant town manager position. It didn't look like somebody who was going to be helping out with economic development. If you're going to do economic development, you got to get to know all the players. You got to understand what your rent structure is. You got to understand where the opportunities are. You have to get to know all the developers and what they think of opportunities in Acton and how they would approach it. You need to understand what kind of rents you can achieve, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very detail-oriented business. The successful person in economic development is a bit of a hustler, and they would certainly have to have a lot of street smarts. And this position, as I read this, is certainly not about street smarts. It's about supervision. So I think we got off the track here on this job description. I think that some of the sort of proactive, positive, on-the-ground, hands-on solutions that most of us recognize are needed are sort of going to get done after the supervisor comes in. I just don't see that. Furthermore, I would make the comment that, at least from the perspective of the Economic Development Committee, that we've always had a terrific relationship with the building department. They've always been responsive. The building department was the first department in town hall to really get aggressive about making up pamphlets for people. You want to put a deck on your house? Here's what you got to know. You want to do something to your lot? Well, here's what you got to know, and so on. Not about zoning, but about building. They were proactive in getting they had a little, like kiosk out in front of the counter where you could walk up and you could pick up stuff that would help you out. They were out front on customer service long before it became a mantra in town hall. And so the idea that we're going to have, that they need supervision, to me is laughable. I mean, they're the poster boy for how to do it right. They don't need to be supervised. We need to learn from them about how they turn themselves around that way. So all of that together makes me, and I was a total advocate for this new position, makes me very, very uncomfortable. Frankly, if somebody said, well, how do you feel about it today, I'd have to say I can't support it anymore because it's become so clouded up that I'm not sure what we're getting at all.
So, yeah, I mean, I brought this to the committee's attention because because Kat Hudson, who's on Acton 2020, attended the selectmen meeting and sort of noticed that this was not in line with what we were thinking with Acton 2020's revision of an economic development director. And so we discussed at our last 2020 meeting. And actually one of the things, Bob, that we talked about was just exactly what you said, which is just like, if you're trying to attract a hustler, someone that's excited to get going, this is not the document, like in any way, shape, or form. The committee is going to work on, we have another meeting tomorrow night, with some suggestions and a different draft and everything. But also in agreement with Doug, my view is what happened is that, the town manager wanted these two different positions. We pushed back. We really felt like it should be the economic development position. I can't remember, I think some people in the selectmen said they wanted land use more. I don't know, there was some disagreement, but so they combined it, but it really isn't a combination. It's really a combination in name only, from my view. It is absolutely not what I was envisioning, at least, as an economic development director. Just not even close, and for exactly the reasons that Doug has already articulated. And so it almost makes me think, I don't even know if the same person can do the two jobs. Like, even if they're both half-time. Like, I just don't think that the same person that can be doing like the supervisory land use roles is going to be the same person that can do the economic development director. And so I'd almost recommend, if we really only have, if we were going to combine the position and make it so that we have one full-time position, I would rather just see two half-time positions, two half-time FTEs, and one person is doing economic development and one person is doing this land use piece. Because I think you need two different people. It's just the way they describe it, it's like an ombudsman. I mean, it's nothing to what, for instance, Herman was describing when he went to, was it Lowell? Lowell. That's not what this is.
Herman. It appeared to me, as I read it, that this was nothing more than an attempt at the town manager's attempt to consolidate his span of control. Now, instead of having 6 people reporting to him, he's got 2, in effect. He's got the engineering, Corey, who is now the Public Works Director. I'll talk about that in a little bit from the Town Board of Selectmen meeting. And then he's got this guy, our person, I should say. That's what it looked like to me. And the tip-off is when he wants somebody that's a certified town planner. You know, that tells you really what his intent is. His intent has nothing to do with economic development. His intent is to take the people that now report to him and put another layer between him and them. The building commissioner, the planning director, the health director, the national resources director, and combine them so that he only has one person. So this is just an organizational attempt, and nothing more. And it's kind of, I find it kind of comical that he's actually done that and thought that nobody noticed. You know, this board is far too astute for that. So, you know, there are other little things about this. You know, there's one individual on the staff that I've heard lots and lots of negativity about, and there's nothing about enforcing bylaws and in here at all. And if you're going to be in the least bit concerned with economic development, you have to do something about the way we enforce our bylaws. They want us to work with the GIS office. Do we have one of those? Do we have an office called GIS?
Yeah.
So there's another person reporting to them.
That's a information system.
Hmm?
It's an information system.
Yeah, I know what it is, but I mean,
I don't know if we have an office, but...
they have an office. Anyway, it never dawned on me to be so extreme as Bob, but now that he's laid down the gauntlet, I, for one, will agree 100%. We ought to scrap this and come up with something that has more of a bent toward economic development. If this town doesn't need anything at all, it certainly does need some more economic activity, economic development, just helping get the vacancies in this town, the commercial vacancies in this town occupied would be a mammoth accomplishment.
Mike?
Yeah, I agree with all of the above. I think our problem is not in land use bureaucracy, it's economic development and lack thereof. These two job descriptions are really mutually exclusive. They can't, you know, if you try to do both jobs in one position, it's just a recipe for failure, because you won't succeed at either one of them. I think our focus, I think this job description should be scrapped. I think we should, as a committee, what our support was for and should move forward on is an economic development director, period. If planning people need a resource, maybe they can get their headcount next year or do a contract hire or something to get those issues resolved in another way. But I think our immediate need that we've been trying to get for several years now is economic development. There's lots of opportunities for economic growth in this town that you need some pretty specific expertise to accomplish. You know, survey the existing environment, the existing community, you know, identify what the occupancy rates are, what the rental rates should be, how that impacts town revenue, maybe surveys on what the opportunities could be, you know, what the town needs, what we don't have, and things of that nature. And I think you cannot do both jobs effectively because you will fail at both. And I think, as I said earlier, this description that tries to accomplish both tasks should really be outright rejected, and really has to be rewritten as an economic development focus.
Yes, Doug.
And it's just a sort of a parting shot, but I'm reminded of the expression that a camel is a horse designed by a committee.
Yes, you should.
So,
So we have until Friday to respond. My sense, if I were going to write something tonight, would be to pick up on Bob's initial comment and say it was supported by several members of the committee to throw this one out and start over again. Specifically, I would probably cite the fact that we see this position as described as not having any requirement to have experience in economic development, nor management of multiple functions in a town hall, but merely to have been a planner, which is not what we signed up for. I'm pretty sure we were prepared to reject that position as bureaucratic and not needed, and only went for the compromise when it was reduced to one position and included economic development. So my sense is that's how I would respond to the Board of Selectmen. If anybody wants to make any comments. Yes, Margaret.
well, I just wonder, I don't know if it's realistic or not, but I do wonder, because as some of us have said at least, there's different skill sets involved with these jobs. And I do feel like they're somewhat mutually exclusive, and it's hard to imagine the same type of person being able to do both effectively. And I do wonder if it would be at all possible to just have 2 part-time FTEs. I know that's not what Steve's going to want, because he wants a full-time person to help him manage the town. That's what it seems like he wants. But he did promise us half an FTE for economic development, or at least that's what we thought we were getting, at least. And I just wonder, if there would be a way to propose it that way.
I'm not sure that it's completely mutually exclusive. I think there are towns that have combined the positions. This is not the description of a combined position, however. And the person that could do the job would not be necessarily solely a certified town planner. I'll go out on a limb and give my opinion. That's probably the last thing I'd look for to fill the position.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Do you need a motion?
I'd love a motion, Herman. Go right ahead.
Oh. Well, I move that we direct the chairman to respond, consistent with our discussions, that this particular, and make the point that this particular job description is not what we signed up for, does not have the proper emphasis on economic development, and should be rewritten in that context.
Is there a second?
Second, I would add to that incompatible job requirements.
Any discussion?
I would just say maybe the way that, not as part of the motion, but just maybe the way that you word it is that it's almost like it's an economic development director first, and those are the skills you're looking for, and then that person can also help with the sort of the supervisory management tasks as well. But first and foremost, the skills you're looking for is the guy that's the hustler, right? And then, hopefully that person will have good enough skills to do some management here and there, right? To be able to supervise and make sure things are coordinated and everything like that. But so that the whole position and emphasis and focus is flipped.
I agree with that, and I would add to it that it seems to be perfectly okay if that person, sort of in their spare time, is focused on the zoning, because the zoning is a real impediment. We've built ourselves a zoning structure which is not compatible with, I think, the development expectations of many people. I don't think people realize, for example, that the density of housing that will be created in the ring around West Acton Village is something that they really want to see there. So there's an element to this of examining our existing zoning structure from the standpoint of whether or not it's conducive to development and the right kind of development, and the economic development person has to be right in the middle of that storm to be effective. So I think that's, you're going to get some of that when you put somebody in that job, because things right now are not designed to work well.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Super.
Moving on to Finance Committee business. We have some minutes that were
Oh,
circulated.
yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't pass them out before. I've got a bunch to give to you guys. So, March 24th. I don't know how many I have of each. I'm going to share. You guys can share those. And then March 10th, and then, where are my last ones? And then our pre-town meeting.
We have seen these, right?
Yeah, we have.
The other three, the first two I sent out before, a long
Right.
time ago. This one I
Right.
just sent out today.
These look familiar.
Yeah. I just think we didn't have a chance to vote on because we were busy and whatever.
Yes. Things came together so late. I'll take them one at a time. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 10th?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve minutes of March 24th?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 6th? It's a pre-town meeting.
So moved.
I was present at that meeting.
Do I have a motion to approve as amended?
Yeah, I'll amend that. Yeah.
So moved.
There are also some very minor points that Mary Ann had
Okay.
that I'll integrate as well.
All in favor of April 6th as amended?
Sorry.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Committee reports?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
The Board of Selectmen meeting 2 meetings ago, not last meeting, I unfortunately was unable to attend that, although it was relatively brief, as I recall the agenda. And maybe our erstwhile Selectman representative may have words to say about what went on in that meeting. But I was at the April 27th meeting, which is the second last one. And just briefly, the highlights, looks like we're planning a special town meeting for zoning issues on November 10th to 12th. 10th, I got 10th and 12th.
Yeah, because the 11th is...
That's right, there's a holiday the 11th. So there's also going to be a discussion about whether the Board of Selectmen should be doing site plan reviews. And there's going to be a discussion about whether the town should take over the sewer system at Nagog. And there's also some ongoing discussions about the Richards property as regards parking for the South Acton train station. The further update on that is, I think the appraisal, I know the appraisal's in, and they're talking to Mr. Richards as we speak. A good portion of that meeting was dealt with the Makaha restaurant again. And the bottom line is, without boring you with the details, that the selectmen voted that the new allegations weren't properly substantiated, and they agreed to keep the status quo. That is to say, allow them to have their liquor license on a temporary basis until the ABCC ruled. And I don't know the further update. Have the ABCC ruled? Can you tell us? I don't know.
With your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Of course.
I Yes, it's my understanding that the ABCC had their hearing 2 weeks after that meeting of the Board of Selectmen, and that the commissioners have taken the decision under advisement. So we don't know what the outcome will be, but I got the sense from the report that I saw that the commissioners were not too sympathetic to the selectmen's decision to suspend. But as I keep saying, I was not part of that majority decision. So I'm always dissenting. It's been a habit for the last year.
And then the only other thing of note is that they combined the DPW and municipal properties departments, and now Corey York is in charge of both.
What was it, the two departments?
Excuse me?
Department of Public Works and Municipal Properties.
Okay.
Yeah, I just been here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dean's retiring. I don't think he's gone. I think it's in June.
So Corey's been elevated to
Good for
be
Corey.
in charge of both. Okay, that's it.
Anybody else? Yes, Margaret.
So back to the position discussion. Tomorrow at our next Acton 2020 meeting, we decided that we would convene a few other committees just to kind of talk about this and sort of be able to make a recommendation on behalf of a lot of different committees that this affects. So we're doing that tomorrow. Okay. Kelly's Corner, we had a public meeting last Thursday, and really laying out kind of the preliminary plans, the zoning, and also the infrastructure piece. And, you know, that's kind of where we are. We're almost done with really where the consultants are being engaged. And then the plan is probably do one more big public outreach meeting, maybe September or so, and then it's the town meeting, the fall town meeting is where we would be presenting the zoning. The Kelly's Corner public infrastructure piece, the price tag on that is really high. It's $8 million. And the consultants have kind of helped us to think through, okay, how would we fund that? And there's a program called the TIP program, the Transportation Improvement Program, which is a lengthy process to go through, but it's really the only one that we could get a lot of money from, essentially. But there's a way to sort of patch together some of that money, also the Mass Works money, and then the town maybe chips in a bit. If we decide to go the route of what the public infrastructure plan is. I think it's a great, I mean, I love what they've done in terms of, you know, the plan. I want it, you know, but it's expensive. And so, you know, I've said, you know, once we got a price on it, you know, I said, I've been pretty vociferous about the fact that the town is not going to be contributing a lot towards this. It just doesn't have the means. And it has other capital projects, you know, sort of on the horizon as well that are important to it. And anyway, so.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Doug.
I just would follow that up with a couple of comments. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, and I really wanted to be there. One of the things that I think is sort of underemphasized up to this point is the financeability, which is to say the market viability of the spaces that are being contemplated to be created. And I know that there's a fair amount of residential that's built into this thing. I'd like to see a pro forma. It would be beneficial for the committee to have a pro forma for how you're going to do office space, how you're going to do retail, and how you're going to do residential. How many units will you have sold at how many dollars? What kind of rents does the retail have to command? And what kinds of tenants would you aim for, and so on. That's a huge missing piece, and it goes to the financeability of the whole thing. And so before you really get married to the framework that's been suggested, it seems to me that if it isn't viable, of course that's one thing, but if it's viable but much more with some tweaking and some rethinking along the lines of what is actually doable in terms of market conditions, that would make it that much stronger. And so I would urge you to look at it that way.
So just to respond to that, so part of the consulting piece was actually to do a bunch of different pro formas and look at different pieces of property and the different possibilities of what would work and what doesn't work and what makes it financially viable and what doesn't make it financially viable. So that those pro formas were used to inform the zoning that we're working on. We won't be having a plan that will say we have this many housing units and this much office space, because that's not, I mean, maybe an economic development officer would do that, but that's not what we're doing. We're trying to create the right zoning to bring that kind of stuff. So our pro formas we're trying to sort of test, does this kind of zoning, if we change the zoning to this and that and the other, does it make it financially viable in different scenarios? If you did some housing, if you do some office, if you do some retail, if you do. And so that's what we were kind of testing. But I think it would be great if you wanted to look at some of those pro formas, because you have a lot more expertise than certainly I do about stuff like that. The woman that did it, I think, does have a lot of expertise. And we did spend some time, looking through her assumptions and things like that. So, anyway.
I would suggest that at this stage, it would be very useful for the committee to get more or less married on a consulting basis to a brokerage firm, which does this stuff all day, every day. These are the people who are out on the street selling, flogging the properties and making the deals happen. Somebody who is a planner and is using estimates for which with which she is not intimately involved. I mean, she's not feeding her babies based on those numbers. You need the people who are doing just exactly that to tell you whether or not you can lease third floor space in Kelly's Corner, and at what numbers you're likely to get it leased. Some of the deals that we've done in West Acton Village are shockingly low rents. And it's just a matter of the landlord saying, I don't want it to stand empty. I got to put somebody in. I got to pay the taxes. So there are tenants in some of these buildings, but the tenant is not paying anything like market rent. So it's kind of a Potemkin, village situation where there's somebody there, but they're not really there. And the street broker is the guy who will, or gal who will tell you, yeah, I know that deal, I did it, and here's what happened, and or no, we've never been able to do a deal like that, and you're not likely to build a new building and be able to do it either, even if you get somebody who is dumb enough to be the developer on a deal that is so unproven. So I think that at this stage, it's reality time. You need to do that reality check with somebody who's a street smart, individual, and who can say, yeah, it's doable.
Okay, Roland reported that CBC got their award letters done, but they also started a discussion of increasing the surtax from 1.5% to 3%. No plans necessarily going forward, but at least they're beginning to discuss it. The last page of the packet is yes.
One more committee report.
Oh, sorry.
The Health Insurance Trust met in April, and our treasurer informs us that we are on the negative side of about $500,000. Our consultant still estimates that we should end the year on the positive side of $146,000. And since these two reports are derived in different ways, it's very hard to know which one is the most accurate. The 146 clearly should go down by about $100,000 because we have paid $99,000 to your friendly federal government under the CARE Act for excess insurance, which is a tax levied on self-employed plans. And the Treasurer's report has it. The cash flow report does not carry that in there, which is why the difference would be there. We have settled. We have about 5 different contracts to support the trust, and all of them except reinsurance, which won't be settled until June, we will pay little or nothing additional for the next several years on those, which is good news. Reinsurance premiums at the moment, we've paid $604,000 through March. Through March, we have received $586,000 back, and we have an account receivable for $146,000, which means that our friendly reinsurers are not going to like this year with us.
They're not going to renew at a flat renewal.
But we do not anticipate that big an increase in reinsurance costs because we have one very expensive claimant, and we will pay that out of our own pocket. It'll be excluded by the reinsurers, and so it will not be in the rate, but it will still be there. There's a possibility for a variety of reasons that in 2 or 3 years that claim will go away. Not like some of our claims under excess costs when they die, but just for other reasons that we needn't go into. But until the dust settles sometime in September, we really won't know exactly how the year has turned out. But it's either not very good or we'll squeak through.
Thank you. Last sheet in the packet is the second and fourth Tuesdays in June, July, and August. I'd appreciate it if, and I am going to be on vacation for the next week or so, so I'd appreciate it if you got back to Mike in terms of what dates you are available. I'm thinking, we usually only meet once during July and August, so just let Mike know what dates work for you, and because we'll have to put something out at our next meeting, because May 24th is the last scheduled meeting for this year.
Yeah, just for the record, the July options are July the 14th or the 28th, and August is the 11th or the 25th.
Yeah, I put all the dates down, but, just, and then also along that vein, the moderator has now interviewed 3 candidates. There may be 1 or 2 more that have to be interviewed. Mary Ann has resigned. She resigned over the weekend, effective immediately, so we're committee of 8 at the moment, but I believe Bill's term will be up as of our next meeting anyway, so then we'll be down to 7. Obviously, I'd be inclined to say, let's not meet so often early, and let's get new members on board before we start having a whole lot of meetings. But, it'll depend on when your availability in the summer months is. Yes, Doug?
At one point in the past, we talked about being more formal about the creation of subcommittees. And that the summertime was a good time to put people to work on a subcommittee, and that there are some issues that we can see well into the future that are going to be wrapped around our neck for a good long time, and that perhaps the best way to handle those issues is to create a subcommittee at about this time that would work, at their pace during the summer months, and by the time things pick up in the fall, they're fully educated, they know what the issues are, they've queried the town for info that they need to proceed, and they would be much more effective if they were to do that. So I just throw out the fact that the whole committee may not want to be meeting, but we may want to create, say, a couple of subcommittees that have an agenda and have been tasked to work over the summer.
Typically, that is when we do a lot of subcommittee work. At our next meeting, we will have the schools in for their third quarter report and update. We'll have election of new officers, a subject near and dear to my heart. Yeah, I think it would be, great to have some sense of what kind of subcommittees or work plan we want to try and tackle over the summer months. Yes, Margaret?
One suggestion for that is the transportation working group with the selectmen or whatever, as we discussed doing. So that's one we should do.
Well, I'd say, come to that meeting prepared with your list of subcommittees or working groups or whatever. Anything else, any other business to come before the committee tonight? If so, I will take a motion to have the air conditioner fixed, and followed by a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Next meeting is...
2 weeks.